Hi and welcome to Dynamics Update. Today we have a special episode in store for you. It's one of our interview episodes, and we have tracked down a person that both me and Gustav has followed for a while on LinkedIn, and who has a lot of interesting blog posts about ALM and such. So why don't you introduce yourself?
So, hello, my name is Adrià Ariste, and as Johan was saying, maybe you know me from my blog, ariste.info, where I wrote a big, long development ALM for Dynamics 365 and Azure DevOps. I live in a small town near Madrid in Spain, but I'm from a city near Barcelona. So I moved to Madrid like 10 years ago already. And well, I'm a developer and technical architect, Dynamics 365 developer and technical architect. And I've been working with Dynamics since 2010. So my whole professional life and career has been in the Dynamics, and before that, Axapta. So it's what I do and it's what I know.
Yeah, I can relate, and that's you've also been part then of the transition from Axapta and AX to Dynamics. It will be interesting to see when we get so old, all of us, when we work with people who've only experienced Dynamics 365. And there's a lot of those, of course, out there doing a great job. But it's always going to be like, yeah, I remember old Axapta or AX. It's like, oh, you're that old. Oh, yeah, I am. So it's going to be interesting when that comes.
Yeah. And, you know, I started with Axapta 3, and I worked for a bit, just a little bit, with 2.5. Yeah. And what I see is that the product, you know, in the background, it may seem it's the same because we are still working with X++, but it has evolved a lot, and it looks like it's totally different product.
Absolutely.
It's really fun.
I usually say that the thing was when it was released, I used to say that it was actually the same product but with a different UI. so when it I mean, before we started on the 10 iterations, when it was still in like 7 dot something or 8 dot something, it was still basically AX 2012 R4 with web UI. Yes. Because you had the same code, you had the same batch jobs, you had the same like database structure, and almost everything was the same. But what's then has happened is really impressive, I would say, because they have basically rebuilt the entire product while people were running it in production.
Yeah, absolutely. With one or two like major upgrades in between, right? But it's fun because you can still see some like legacy references. I think the Axapta is still there somewhere in a number of enums in the metadata. I think they're going to leave it in there as long as they can, just for fun or for legacy reasons. Some of the misspellings as well, where you can find in the code as well, or comments at least, transaction a number of times, I think. And it's still there. It's fun. It's like a reminiscence, but it's really, as you say, again, super cool to see the whole like transitioning. And even now, I used to react to like the Office 365 product, where you could like come to work on a Monday, and then on a Tuesday you get like an update, and one button has moved slightly to the right because of like AI and tracking. Now we see that, not as often, of course, but we see the same like evergreen changes coming in. So the old AX was more like you implement, you build, and then it's like static. And then now it's like changes coming all the time. So that change in mindset has really been, it's been interesting to see, to say the least.
Yes, the truth is that what we have now with, for example, the automatic updates, I just had to do one manual update to an Dynamics AX 2009. I had to install the SP1 pack, and well, it was interesting. just to having to compare all the objects that were modified, because of course we were overlayering code because there was no other way to do it. And I spent 2 weeks comparing
I
objects.
remember that as well. Then we got the impact analysis, but that wasn't there for 2009. I think we had to do that code comparison checking, and then it had its moments, of course, as well, and it still does sometimes. But with the new the new transitioning and the new product portfolio comes a lot of you used to be able to be an AX specialist, an AX expert, right? You could do now. We have to know all about these other tools, and that's where I think one of the reasons of this podcast and the reasons I suspect with your blog, not say the least, to kind of help out. So another new thing with this whole new with 365 is the change in how much information and community information and how much helpful articles is available. Because back in the day, there was not that much available, to be honest. You could Google and you could find some community pages, but now we have docs. We have a lot of good material covering all of these different areas. And I think also the product team and Microsoft themselves are much more available on a global scale to answer questions that pop up when you run into issues doing those comparisons or analysis. So that's another different thing. You can actually, I think we discussed this in a previous podcast before, that there can be too much information in the Yammer threads and teams and then the internal. There's that's why I really like your blog, because it kind of summarizes a lot of areas, of course, but focusing on the ALM part, which is not a small area at all. And it's a comment or feedback is that it's written in a podcasty way, if you understand what I mean. It's not written like a boring scientific text. You can see that you wrote this on a personal level. I especially love that you have one segment, I think it's called Things I Don't Know, or things I don't remember what it is, but I love that headline. And these are things that I don't know or that I can't understand or stuff that I should work on. And then you publish that as a blog post. I think that's because that's where a lot of people are, right? This is an area I would like to know more about, but I'm not there yet. So it's a really good blog.
Thanks. Yes, it's what happens, I'm a very technical person, and the thing I like about my job is that I think my job is helping other people solve their problems. So when I solve a problem, I solve theirs. And sometimes I find things that I just don't know why this is working or why this isn't working, or why are they using this code here? And these kind of things are the things that make my job more fun.
Yeah, it's fun, but also it's sort of frustrating, because yes. I know during the 7 years that I've been working with F&O that there's been a lot of time that if I've been sitting several hours, but I'm fairly convinced that I could, if I find the correct person, they could in 5 minutes just tell me what was going on. The problem was that you need to solve things by doing detective work instead of understanding things.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that was never more true than in the older installations as well. But it's still there. Sometimes it can move too fast. I mean, our podcast here is trying to summarize coming changes, coming updates, etc. And every time we do this, we kind of go through all the release documentation, and it's a lot, right? So it can be threatening, or it can be a lot of information to digest. So on the other hand, now we have a lot of information coming, but you still need to invest time into actually doing the detective work, the test, because it's one thing understanding how the component works. It's another thing understanding, does it work in my installation? It's a different thing. Specifically the features and the now with the automation part, you can come a long way from a technical perspective. We are all three technical nerds here, or technical architects, so you can automate a lot, and test automation as well as another thing. But it's really important that some things cannot be automated, specifically for ERP, because it's so complex scenarios, right? You have to, in the end, do some stuff manually, at least when it comes to testing and approval.
Yes, and we were talking about this before starting the recording. for example, Gustav, you said that thing about source code and Dynamics AX. And the first time I saw a source control system being used with Dynamics AX was in 2016. So, and it was an AX 2009. You know that for me, source control before that was something for .NET.
Yeah, it was what was it called? It's source safe, right?
Yeah, that project used Morph.
Okay.
Morph BC.
Yeah, the Morph, the built-in version control. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, why aren't you using just comments in the code?
Yeah.
And
exactly.
And so somebody did this, and we have been using it since we started the project. And so this shows that I guess, and I hope, we still have much more things in the future to learn and to change, because I always feel like AX people or FNO people are from like a different planet than other software developers, because we live inside our product, and just having all the dev or the ALM possibilities we have now was something that, as you said before, it was investigation work. Because when I first learned about FNO, I had a training, 2 weeks training from a guy, which was very good. The training was great, but when we asked how we do create a package to deploy to production, well, you go to Visual Studio, create deployable package, and that's all. And that's what we did for almost 1 year, until one day the deployable package wasn't created correctly, because there were some missing. The application suite model wasn't being included in the deployable package, because it was a 7.0. It was before update 2. And that's when I learned, because Microsoft support guy told me, you need a big machine. What? Sorry. And that's when I started investigating, and I think that moment was when I started with ALM. And well, I'm happy that we have that now, because in hindsight, I think that I could have lost a lot of work, a lot of times. And it never happened.
Oh, good.
But it was like just trusting in some kind of magic that the copies of the servers wouldn't blow up, or I never had an issue with that, but I'm very happy we do have now TFBC.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's come a really long way, and it's improving even now, right? I mean, LCS was not the most fun product to work with. It still isn't in some ways, of course, but looking at LCS from like same like experience here, looking at from my initial project, not only LCS, the whole like onboarding part coming from AX 2012. We're not gonna reminisce too much about the old stuff, but coming from like an on-prem or even like Azure-based older client-server-based type application, such as AX 2012 or 2009, like the installation, you want coming more from an infra perspective, you can relate to like, okay, here's the installation CD, here are the servers, track the fiber. I mean, all of that stuff that really like goes out the window now. Moving into, we're gonna like a cumbersome Office 365 process. That was my first like real bad experience with 365. The whole like onboarding part where you had to understand like, okay, it's Office 365, you have to purchase licenses, acquire them. This whole connection with the tenants, it's tricky. But once it was more tricky before. Now it's more like mature. Of course, it's easier. It's better documented. And LCS, of course, has come a long way with the APIs. And now I'm not sure, maybe you know better, Adria, about the LCS being deprecated. I think just today or like 2 days ago, I think they deprecated the 2012 in LCS, right? It's been there for a while, but it's deprecated now, so going out the window. But I think LCS as well is moving out, is what I've heard rumors about, moving over to a different admin platform. But it's not clear yet. Do you know anything about it?
Well, I think it's public, this information, and today I saw some parts of a session of the India user group on YouTube, and there was the product team there, Sunil Garg and Lane Svenka, Rama Krishnamurti, which she's the lead for DualWrite, I think, and several other people talking about this convergence scenario that we are going into, and I think that the plan is that LCS goes to Power Platform Admin Center. And, well, I will like to see
absolutely.
that.
And I think it's clear the whole convergence, that's a big topic specifically from an ALM perspective. I think the whole app discussion and the convergence part with 365 sales, 365 F&O, Dataverse. We know Microsoft really loves their admin portals, right? You have to have at least 3 of them, otherwise you can't do your work. So I understand that it makes sense to streamline, and I think specifically the Power Platform or the Dynamics like 365 non-F&O architecture makes total sense to use as that type of admin tool. You see it a lot. You see it in the inventory visibility app as well. The admin interface there is also Power Apps. Everything is powered by Dataverse, and then you have the API connectors back to D365 F&O, and you have the low-level replication out to Dataverse. So from an architecture selection perspective, it makes total sense. It's just I'm hoping that we don't have to start again with what we already have from an API and an automation perspective from an ALM. Rather that we get everything that we have today in LCS, we get there as well, and hopefully some new stuff as well. But let's see.
Yes.
Yeah, and I also think that one of the things that has been a bit of a frustration is that, I mean, you have the entire Azure stack, which is a great tool set with a lot of automation options and things. And what's been frustrating is that you can't basically use any of it for Dynamics. You had a special tool where you do special things and that you can't automate, and it's a bit annoying, especially since when I moved over to work with F&O and AX was right when PowerShell started to become really, really popular, and you started automating everything with PowerShell, and all of a sudden we can't almost not do anything with automation anymore. We have to do everything manual, which is a bit frustrating. But that's why I think that consolidating all of these portals into something smaller is an easier and better, and that's been more worked through is a good thing, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, you can do a lot in PowerShell now with you have the D365 F&O tools, right? Those are pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think those guys have some work to do to rework it towards the new platform, not to say the least. But again, the less portals I have to use in my daily work, the happier I am, of course. That makes a lot of sense. But I think it goes to say that that's more in line with the convergence and the dual write scenario, rather than just moving the portal over to a different area. I don't think that's the biggest concern. It's more how do we get these apps to talk to each other? Dual write is one, right? And then from an ALM perspective, I'm not sure about the release cadence for. I don't have that much experience working with the CRM side, more from an integration perspective, like making sure the data is pushed. But usually, like ERP, speaking to the ERP people doing things differently, it's basically one of the reasons that we do things differently is that the systems are so business critical, right? It's ERP, it's enterprise level, it's hard. You can't really do those like quick Friday releases, and then it didn't work, then we roll it back. It's not doable, right? Because it's business critical. A lot of these systems are 24/7 operational, and it's really complex business scenarios in many cases. And I'm not going to do a comparison here between customer engagement, but like it's more like, say, customer and like the lead scenario. Something can be a little bit in the customer. It can be a customer. An object can be a customer. It can be something else. You're not sure. You can add something to it, but in ERP, when it comes to ERP, it has to have a number of like really static data. It has to have an invoice address. It has to have a number of it has to be more rigid when it comes to ERP. So one thing is dual write, super cool with the common data model, making sure that we can actually agree on what the customer needs to have. But from an ALM perspective, any like release changes, do we then have to like do testing in CRM as well? I think that story from a convergence perspective is super interesting to see where it goes. We really have to understand all components in the whole architecture. You can't be just an ERP expert. You can be ERP expert, but you still have to know whatever you do, what impact that has on the other side, and vice versa.
Yes, that's something that I think we have at least some advantage compared to the CRM or Dataverse people, because it's my opinion, and it's something that I'm not wanting to talk bad about the CRM, but I think it's easier to learn some concepts of the CRM than those of the ERP. And so we are lucky because, for example, when you explain to somebody that works with a CRM the global address book concept, and so it's sometimes they it's not a very complicated concept, but because of the CRM has a different data model with accounts and so instead of customers and vendors. So they need to understand that, you're going to create an account on the CRM, but this account might be a customer or a vendor on the ERP, depending on the role of that party. And hopefully we are on the hard side, so it's easier.
Yeah, exactly. And again, not like saying that one is better than the other. It's just different. It's a different data model, and it's more. The way I understand it, at least, it's easier to change based on, I mean, not from a system perspective perhaps, but you can have like 10 objects that one of them might be converted to a customer because it was the other 9 were leads that didn't pan out to a customer. So you have more data that's more or less like complete, whereas in the ERP you have to have at least some values for completeness in order to complete the process. So that's something that's easily missable when you say that, okay, we have dual write, so we can actually update customers here and it will automatically update them here, etc. Sure, but what data do you actually capture in that scenario? So a lot of that analysis, it's easy to miss that you still need to do that analysis work, even though the technical parts actually work. And that's a really good thing, to not have to build those integrations. But from a like data analysis and data capture perspective, you still have to do your homework on what you need as a business. So hopefully that the app story here, the discussions that everyone we have the F&O app over here, and we have the 365 sales app over here, makes it sound so easy, but it's under the hood, it's really complicated, as we know.
And also, I think it will help to the salespeople in the Dynamics space, because I've seen this recently when somebody bought a license or licenses for CRM, and then for their ERP, they were sometimes a bit confused on, but everything is Dynamics 365. Why is not all data in the same database, or why do we have to build an integration, or why is the technology behind the ERP and the CRM different?
Yeah, the thing was, we actually discussed this a couple of days ago. What I think that people have heard when Microsoft have talked about it is that we have this Dynamics product. It's an ERP and a CRM, but I have never heard them actually speak about one product. I've only heard them speak about the suite of products. And I mean, if you look at, for instance, the Office suite, I mean, you don't confuse Word with Excel with PowerPoint. They do completely different things, but are still part of an ecosystem which integrates into each other. And I would say that this is the same thing, that as long as we see it as a suite, there is really no, I mean, of course, from a maintainability point, there is a point, but there is not that much point in forcing F&O into Dataverse database or vice versa, moving CRM into like the SQL, Azure SQL backend and so on. Because as long as it's sort of a seamless integration from the customers, the end users part, I don't really see it as a big issue.
No, the seamless part, and then of course the seamless part is the critical one here, right? It has to work, and as long as you make your configuration correct, it will. Then I think that comparison is quite good to kind of explain it. Yeah, it's like Excel and PowerPoint. Basically, they are part of the same suite. They have a number of like interoperability tools that you can use to make things easier. You can import a grid into PowerPoint, etc. But it's two different applications. That's how it is in the end. They're both running on Azure. That's the big that's the big thing, right? But I'm not sure. Do you know? Speaking of Azure, the one of the biggest, as we discussed before, like the biggest changes, of course, with 365 being you're not able to access the data the same way as we used to with on-prem, etc. But I'm not sure with 365. It's the same setup, right? That you are not able to access the underlying data store, so you have to work with entities and export from CRM side. Do you know? Johan or Adria?
Yes, and I think that because they have been on the cloud for much longer than us, they are used to it.
Exactly, it's the same story, but they also have an easier data schema, right? It's less normalized. Everything is more flattened, if I understand correctly, so it's easier to work with, if I understand it right.
Yes, I think that they still have to download data.
Yeah, and also I think that the reason why we think it's so different is that we are used to having the SQL server. If we have a dev environment, we actually have access to an SQL database where we can create select clauses and so on.
And the Azure BYOD, the old.
but if you look at CRM, I mean, Dataverse is actually from CRM from the beginning. Exactly. So it is. I mean, what we call Dataverse is the
CRM.
Yeah, but that's also a bit tricky now, because the last call we had with Microsoft, they actually said that we consider Dataverse being part of F&O from now on with this convergence thing. So when you set up a new environment, you actually get a blank Dataverse database. And then you can select to deploy CRM applications into that database. But the owner of the database is F&O, because that's where it originated, which makes it even more confusing, because from my perspective, the Dataverse has always been CRM. That doesn't have anything to do with us. We might talk to it or we might run flows against it, but it doesn't have anything to do with our infrastructure. But now all of a sudden it is part of our infrastructure.
Yeah. So another component to be mindful about, of course, a component. Dataverse is like it's not a component. It's, as you say, something that kind of ties everything together, of course, together. It lights up a number of different scenarios in Azure as well as in Power Platform, of course, if you can make it work, matching your business scenario.
Yes, that's another point, right? And dual write is good, but I think that it needs a bit of work still, especially when setting it up. And at least the problems I found was, for example, moving table mappings between environments. You can export a solution on Dataverse, but when you import it to another environment, the integration keys aren't imported. So they need to have all of these things into consideration just to make our life easier.
Yeah, but I also think that one part in this is that when we do when we migrate the customer from AX 2012 to FNO, we almost never do a code upgrade. We set up a new environment and selectively move in customizations over to the new environment. And I think the thing is that we should probably do the same thing for CRM, that when we do an implementation of ERP, we should probably prepare the customer that the CRM that we set up for the new ERP is a new CRM, and that we do the same kind of move of customizations over to CRM as well. Because I totally agree. It will be I'm not sure if it will be a harder project, because it's actually not that simple to do, like to fix the incompatibilities. That's even harder, I would say. But moving it into a new environment actually gives them a chance to clean up the CRM as well.
Yeah, I guess that depends on the project, because what I've seen also is a customer wanting to link their FNO to an existing CRM with a ton of custom solutions, and well, it has to be done, and it was done. And without problems.
But the thing is that's interesting is that if someone came to you and said that we are going to do it the other way, we have an existing CRM, we want to integrate it to FNO, and you need to do all of the changes on the FNO side. You wouldn't be happy with that.
No,
because you would have to customize it to almost break it. That's the problem. And I think the whole point of this is that you have a set of rules for CRM, you have a set of rules for FNO, and if those rules are set up in order not to integrate them, or integrate them in a very, very, very controlled manner. If you're using dual write, you're actually writing things directly into the database. And in that case, you actually need to do it a bit more carefully and a bit more controlled. So that's why I think that it's important to understand that if you're doing this with dual write, you need to make sure that it will be a lot of work either way. It will be a lot of work if you redo CRM and you move things over. It will also be a lot of work if you want to keep it. So it's important to understand that both of it will create a lot of work, I would say.
Yeah, it goes to my point previously as well to say, I mean, dual write is, again, a technical component that gives us the possibility to solve a couple of scenarios without having to build custom integrations. But in both of your scenarios, either side has already been customized. And the question is, can we use the tool for our needs? You don't have to use dual write, but it's there. Of course, it's a lot of like buzz around dual write right now. Again, important to understand, don't like enable dual write just because you can for everything. Like, enable it where it suits you. If it matches your needs, you don't have to have like full blown dual write data flowing all across. Do you need it? Does it match your needs? And then use it as that technical component that it is. And it does light up a couple of different scenarios, but it doesn't really make any sense, at least not from my understanding right now, to just go like full blown export everything. There you have different capabilities there for like data lake and other scenarios. It's on a need basis, I would say. I hope, at least.
Yes. And when it doesn't work, it's a headache. Fixing dual write is a headache. It's terrible.
Yeah. But it goes again back to what you said before about is a black box, really. Like, you can understand if it pops up over here, great. If it doesn't, okay, how can I figure out what went wrong? I can only work with the error messages that are given to me. So again, back to like detective work and making sure that it should work, it matches our need. But if I can't really open the hood and understand it, then detective work becomes more of a like ticket issue towards Microsoft in this case, which is also fine if it doesn't create a lot of tickets.
Yes, and in the end, I guess that also sending tickets because we find problems helps get the product a bit better.
Yeah, and that's a good takeaway. Exactly. I mean, as long as we don't end up being like the ones taking on the hit too much, us three at least, we kind of test things before, of course, as much as we can. But it's a good balance, I hope, between releasing like working stuff and not having the clients find out about all the bugs. But it's but all use cases are different, basically. That's my key experience here. Even if it's been tested 10 times somewhere else, that doesn't mean that it works at your instance. Never does. Right.
Actually, I think that we've sort of starting to hit the end of our recording. So I would just like to ask you if there is anything else that you would like to bring up.
Well, I guess that it's something that I think I've written about and I've talked about in the sessions in the community I give. But if somebody is still working with Dynamics AX or is new to F&O, I think that the good advice is to stop thinking that they are only AX developers and they have to learn about Dataverse, they have to learn about Azure, about Azure DevOps, and that's good. And I encourage everybody to learn about that because otherwise, well, they will get stuck with AX things.
Yeah, and things will not be as much fun. I think that's a very good comment from you, Adria. And also with the help of your blog and other community material that is there, I sometimes might feel like too overwhelming to learn all that stuff. But it's really not. You don't have to like be an expert in all areas, but you need to know about them. You need to understand how they fit into the whole architecture, and you can do that with the help of a lot of material that's there. But you, like you say, that's a very good recommendation. You can't not do it. You have to do it. Yeah.
So I would like to just say thank you for joining us tonight. It was really fun and a very interesting discussion.
So thanks for inviting me. It has been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And with that, I think we say goodbye for tonight.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.